If you aren't aware, BMG just published a new test feature available in the experimental game mode or with test features on in custom games that completely reworks the dodge cooldown system. In this video, I will explain to you exactly how the dodge system works currently, how these test features change it, what that means for the future of gameplay and balance, and why you should really pay attention to this because of what it means for the future of Brawlhalla. Bit of a hint, it's because you, and yes, I mean you, directly have the power to influence it. The current dodge system is a bit complicated, but I'll try to lay it out as simply as possible. Right now, there are two categories of dodge, and depending on which one you fall under while using it, your cooldown will be affected. Grounded dodges, which is just starting it from the ground, always have a cooldown of 60 frames, or 1 full second. This is the shortest possible cooldown, and it's why grounded dodges are the least risky. This also includes grounded chase dodges. Aerial dodges, on the other hand, have a maximum cooldown of 163 frames, or around 2.72 seconds. This can be reduced, however, if you land on the ground during that cooldown period, which is partly why you'll see top players use a lot of diagonal dodges into the ground. The way that it works is if you use your aerial dodge and then land on the ground within 75 frames, or 1.25 seconds, the cooldown will reset to that value, and you'll get your dodge back after just 75 frames. In other words, that's the minimum cooldown of an aerial dodge. And if you land on the ground anytime after 75 frames, your dodge will immediately become available. So if you use a dodge from the air, your cooldown can be anything from 75 to 163 frames, or 1.25 to around 2.72 seconds. If that sounds a little bit complicated, it's because it is. But don't mistake that complication with poor design, because it actually functions quite well. This system intuitively makes it feel like being near the ground is safe, and being far from it, like off stage for example, is dangerous, as your ability to escape punishment greatly increases the closer you are. That's beside the point though. To sum it all up, if you use a grounded dodge, you will not be able to dodge again for 1 second. If you use an aerial dodge, you will not be able to dodge again from 1.25 to about 2.72 seconds, depending on your movement. This new dodge system works quite differently. If you dodge, you have 130 frames, or about 2.17 seconds, of cooldown. That's it. It doesn't matter if it's a grounded dodge, an aerial dodge, a gravity cancel, whether you touch after 75 frames or chase dodge into the ground, it's 130 frames. Always. So what does this mean? Well, these changes seem to serve two main goals, both of which have been pretty clear objectives of BMG for a long time. The first is to reduce player uncertainty by bringing clarity to some of the game's more minimal design choices or abstract mechanics, and the second is to increase consistency across interactions and, in a sense, reward more aggressive play. Let's talk about clarity first. Think about things like the red jump indicator, the wall touch indicator, the clear GC platform sweat beats when you're out of options. All of these were added within the past year, and they all serve a very similar purpose. Clearly communicating information that might not be obvious to every player while still maintaining the minimalist feel of the game. This is one part of the dodge changes. By standardizing the timing regardless of your positioning and removing the variable 75 to 163 frame aerial cooldown, you never have to worry about awkward ground touches or question whether your opponent briefly landed before your string starter hit them. Of course, this has its upsides and downsides, and you could argue an element of skill is removed by eliminating variable cooldown tracking, but yeah, that's for another video. This is simply laying out the game theory behind the change. Regardless, the reason why this is such a massive deal is because unlike the previously mentioned visual alterations that might indirectly affect a scenario but don't actually alter any numbers, this dodge change affects gameplay directly, and because it's on the most central mechanic to all of Brawlhalla, it pretty much affects every aspect of gameplay. That's when we get into the second objective, increasing consistency and rewarding good movement and good initiations. In short, these cooldown changes make safe dodges in neutral much riskier, as any misstep, even if you land on the ground, results in a potential full string. It also makes punishes more consistent, as previous strings where it's unclear whether your opponent fell to the ground or not and therefore got their dodge back earlier will no longer have that problem. Baiting out movement or attacks with your dodge is inherently more risky, as the consequence for not pulling it off is significantly higher. This means proficiency in your dashes, jumps, fastfall, ledge cancels become way more important, and generally speaking, defensive dodging in neutral is substantially nerfed. It's important to note though that aggressive dodging too, in a sense, has been nerfed in that it's more risky, and chase dodging towards your opponent can leave you pretty vulnerable as you're still on maximum cooldown. But overall, from a design standpoint, it seems to target the current liberal use of dodge in neutral a lot more. Additionally, dodge reads and dodge traps are flipped on their head, as the idea of a grounded dodge being easier to punish but with an abrupt end is no longer the case, and long continuous aerial traps are sometimes shorter by a move, as the aerial cooldown is cut down. Finally, and there's definitely way more to discuss, this is just the basic outline, it changes the timing of back and forth dodge circles, where one player will go for a hit or a string that gets dodged, and then the other player retaliates with a hit or a string that gets dodged, and then the other player retaliates the retaliation with a hit or a string that gets dodged, and so on and so forth. With these changes, catching a dodge will always ensure a full punish, meaning this rapid fire back and forth of dropped strings just won't happen. These changes obviously present a laundry list of potential balance problems, which is why it's in test features and why I'm making this video to begin with. This is a fundamental change to Brawlhalla's design, and you have the power to influence it. Play with it, test it, break it. That's the goal of a public testing realm like the experimental queue. They want us, the people who are going to end up having to use it in the future, to figure out what exactly is wrong so they can fix it and release it in the best state possible. The fact that these changes made it this far means BMG is seriously considering implementing this into the live game, but they won't do it if it feels half-baked. They gave us something fresh to break, but if we don't test it out properly, ultimately we're the ones that are gonna end up unhappy because either it'll go absolutely nowhere, or it'll be released in a state that could have used more oversight, but without player feedback it was impossible to know. We could even decide as a community that, hey, this should be scrapped. It was a fun idea, but it uprooted way too many things kind of deal. Both cases have happened. We've had Dash and we've had Double GC, two things that fundamentally changed everything about how the game functions. One of those has been with us for the past 4 years and one lasted a few weeks. That's why constructive feedback is so important. Remember that these are test features for a reason. They're meant to feel quite different from the live game and be tweaked in accordance with players' experiences. Things like the gravity cancel cooldown, chase dodge cooldowns, specific string damage numbers, even the frame number for the dodge itself, all of those can be mended in the future from our feedback, because ultimately we're the only ones that can give it. Granted, now that Brawlhalla is big enough where they have to coordinate patch timings super far in advance to adhere to PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo and Apple and Android guidelines all at once, it might seem like they're awfully delayed in their responses, but trust me, making a massive change like this to a core mechanic is a huge risk for a business that's already succeeding. Brawlhalla is a successful game, and BMG does not need to change anything. People say it's dying, it's a money printer. Every skin sells $1 bajillion, so again, as a business, they'd probably prefer not to change anything just to be safe. But the thing is that they're not just a business. They want the game to be good. The devs are real people, and so they want this to work out as much as we do. Probably even more. Because if it flops for us, well, we'll just play super auto pets for the night. But if it flops for them, that's 20-some people out of a job. It sounds extreme, but it's not out of the question. It's happened so many times in the past where a dev team will push out changes to a fundamental part of their game thinking it'll improve things, but end up cascading downward into a destruction of the studio in the process. Making it in the games industry is impossible, so if you've already got something that works and people that depend on it to continue working, why risk innovation? So let me reiterate this. Reworking dodge is a massive risk for the game. Any changes, especially at this scale. So this is a big moment, arguably bigger than the dash change because the game was so much smaller at that point in time. We might look at this in the future as a major turning point in Brawlhalla's game direction, as again, the last time they did something like this was 4 years ago. Try not to let that icky feeling of immediate change of your muscle memory not being accurate impact your impressions too much, as critically thinking about all the potential positives and all the potential negatives of this as you play through is what's going to get the best end result. I love Brawlhalla, and whether or not I'm a fan of these experimental changes personally, that's something I'll address in another video, I want the game to be fun, and I want it to succeed. And if a change this huge is something that I and you have the power to influence, then you bet I'm gonna try my best to do my part and see that through one way or another. Anyway, I wanted to keep this one short, so that's all I have to say today. Check out yesterday's video where I cued Brawlhalla with a piano. Probably not yesterday by the time this goes out, because that was a fun one. I'm going back to my editing cave now. Got some fun videos on the horizon, so look out for those if you wanna. But thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.